Hello everyone! Tonight we're going to walk with Napoleon's army not into glory, but into one of history's slowest, most haunting defeats. You're sweating under the weight of your gear, flies buzzing, boots sinking into hot Russian. Madame, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Tell me your location and local time in the comments. I want to know who's drifting into dreams with Napoleon tonight. Now, turn down the lights. Turn on the fan to some soothing background music and enjoy your evening ride together. You're dragging your feet behind 600,000 others, the largest invasion force the world has ever seen. Somewhere far up the line, Napoleon rides ahead on a white horse like some kind of war god. You're dodging horse poop and trying to ignore the itch in your boots. Russia smells weird, too clean, too quiet. You cross the Niemen River in June, and it feels like walking into a country that doesn't want to be saved or conquered. Fields are black, villages are empty. You find a well one day and lean down to drink, only to find the water poisoned with ash. It's not a fluke, it's strategy. The Russians are burning everything behind them. That's the thing about the scorched earth. Tacticate doesn't just destroy your enemies, it humiliates them. Napoleon thought he'd take one big bite out of Russia and the Tsar would fall to his knees. Instead, he's chewing air. You march further, the days grow hotter, and the food grows colder because there isn't any. Locals vanish before you arrive. Entire towns are left looking like abandoned film sets. Sometimes you see fires in the distance, like ghosts setting traps. And you realize, with an uneasy squint, that the Russians are fighting not with swords, but with silence. The joke going around camp is that Napoleon's greatest enemy isn't the Russian army, it's Russian agriculture. You laugh, but you also sell your last tin of salt pork for a moldy onion. Soldiers steal from each other, and the horses are starting to collapse more often. Once, you saw a general riding a mule. Not a war mule, a farm mule. No one said anything. Historians are still debating whether the Russian high command truly expected this level of success so early, or if they simply hoped Napoleon would trip over his own arrogance. But it's clear, the war is already bleeding Napoleon dry. And winter hasn't even started waving hello yet. This isn't a fight, it's a funnel, and you're walking right down its throat. You wake up sweating through your linen shirt, because even though it's war, it's July in Russia, and that sun hits different. Your boots are damp with dew, your fingers sticky from boiled tree bark. Yes, tree bark. You and the rest of the Grand Army are now part-time lumberjacks and full-time starving philosophers. Napoleon, though, he's not sweating, at least not where you can see. From the front of the line, rumors float back like smoke. He's got wine, maps, and a personal chef who apparently still makes soufflés. You squint down at your leather scrap of breakfast and try not to get mad. But it's getting harder. You pass a village where the smoke is still fresh. Barns collapsed in on themselves. Bodies of animals curled in frozen poses, not from cold, but from the quick torch of retreating peasants. The Russians don't fight you in open fields. They leave you poisoned wells, booby-trapped sheds, and horses that look at you with the exact same fear you feel. One day, you meet a local boy who spits at you, then runs into the woods. Someone shoots at him, they miss, but no one laughs. You're deep in enemy country now, and it's starting to feel like every tree trunk has eyes. Napoleon finally gets what he wanted, a battle Borodino. You don't know the name yet, but the moment the artillery opens up, you know this is different. The noise is not just loud, it's a physical force. Cannon fire rattles your ribs. The air turns brown with gunpowder and burnt hair. You watch a friend vanish in front of you, just gone in a red flash. He's not even important enough to bury. No one is. They call Borodino a French victory. And sure, the Russians retreat. But you don't feel like you've won anything except another march into nothing. You're losing men faster than dice in a gambler's hands. One French soldier writes that the ground was so soaked in blood that boots stuck like glue. That's not how boots are supposed to work. Later, you pass wagons piled high with wounded. You see men whose faces are just gauze now. One is singing a lullaby to himself over and over, like he's still at home in Normandy. You want to join in, but you've forgotten the words. Maybe you never knew them. Here's a weird one. Someone finds a piano in a burnt-out cottage and plays Mozart on it, horribly, while cannonballs wind past. The whole platoon stops. You don't know if it's sad or stupid, but you all listen, like it's church. Historians still debate whether Napoleon should have turned back after Borodino. He won, but at what cost? The Russians had bled him just enough to turn the rest of the campaign into a very slow disaster. And Moscow would prove that victory is a really flexible word. You've been dreaming of it, Moscow. The golden domes, the feasts, the warm roofs, the promised jewel of the campaign. That's what they told you. That's what Napoleon believed. A city that would kneel before the greatest army Europe had ever seen. A bargaining chip that would finally bring Tsar Alexander to his senses. But when you finally reach it, dragging blistered feet across the ruined road, it feels like a trick. Moscow is silent, like a set built for a play. But the actors have all run off. Doors hang open. Windows are empty. No cheering citizens. No bread. No surrender. And then the fires start. At first, it's just one plume of smoke, then another, then another. Within hours, the sky turns red and breathing becomes a chore. Moscow is burning not from French fire, but from Russian matches, whether it was the mayor, the military, or just angry townsfolk. No one agrees. Historians are still debating whether it was an organized scorched earth tactic or a final act of chaotic defiance. But you just know the city you hoped to rest in is now trying to kill you. The food stores are wrong. Horses break loose in terror, some trampling through the camp. You try to sleep with smoke in your nose and your uniform stuffed into a corner of your mouth to block it. Even Napoleon, in his gilded quarters, has to flee to the outskirts when his palace catches flame. The soldiers start to lose it. Some loot what's left. Others chase rats through the alleys like it's a game show challenge. One guy eats candles. Another writes home saying he'd give anything for a rotten onion. And when the sky finally clears, it's not salvation, it's emptiness. And Napoleon, he waits. He's convinced the Tsar will come, that Alexander will send envoys, white flags, pleadings for peace. But weeks pass, the leaves turn, the nights get longer, and still nothing. You and the others wait with him, but it's not discipline. Anymore, it's inertia. You build little huts from broken beams. You steal fur coats from store mannequins and pretend they're spoils of war. You're not an empire anymore. You're a heavily armed camping trip. Meanwhile, the Russians are regrouping. Guerrilla raids pick off your supply lines. Cossacks slice through the stragglers like wolves. And the weather, it hasn't even begun to turn. Napoleon finally gives the order to retreat, not because of the winter, not yet, but because there's nothing left to win. Moscow didn't fall. It vanished, like a ghost city that lured you in with golden promises, then laughed while it disappeared into Ashdod, and now you've got to walk back the way you came. Through that same burned land, with half the strength and none of the hope. You're walking now, marching, not advancing, just walking. The retreat begins like a cruel parody of a parade, thousands of soldiers winding back through the same ruined path. But now, it's colder, quieter, and you're not sure if it's the wind or just fewer voices. Napoleon sets the pace, still believing he can save face, still sending out orders as if everything's reversible. But behind him, the Grande Army is unraveling. You pass frozen wagons, overturned by panicked horses or sheer exhaustion. You spot men huddled around dead oxen, carving strips of meat like it's Christmas dinner. One man tries to fry leather his own boot over a twig fire. Spoiler alert, it doesn't taste like chicken. The first frost is barely a whisper white edges on leaves, a thin shimmer on the river. But you know what it means? It's the appetizer. Russia is just getting started. And then, like a switch flipped by some sadistic god, the real cold hits. Temperatures plunge below freezing overnight, your breath becomes smoke, your fingers refuse. To bend, eyelashes frost over and snap if you rub them too hard. Cannons are abandoned because the metal freezes. Horses drop by the dozens. Some are eaten on the spot. One soldier builds a sled from broken door panels and straps himself to it, pretending he's in a toboggan race. You're too cold to laugh. Napoleon keeps trying to stay ahead, move faster, outpace the weather, but even he can't outrun the chaos. The army splits into fragments. Men desert, hide in barns, or wander off into the woods hoping for a miracle. Cossack raiders circle like sharks. Their attacks are fast, brutal, and often psychological. They don't want your lives, they want your morale, and it works. You stop walking in lines, you start walking in clusters, then in pairs, then alone. Smolensk, Napoleon tries to regroup, but it's like trying to reassemble a shattered mirror. The faces around him are gaunt, eyes sunken, uniforms ragged. He's no longer leading an army, he's shepherding ghosts. And the strangest part, there hasn't been a proper battle since Moscow. Not really. This wasn't a grand clash of titans, it was a slow dissolve. A logistical failure on a continent-sized scale. Napoleon wasn't beaten by a general or a bullet. He was beaten by distance, fire, frost, and stubborn Russian silence. Historians still debate whether he should have left earlier, whether Moscow was even worth it. But out here, with snow filling your boots and frostbite chewing your toes, those debates feel like luxury problems. You just want to survive the next mile. At this point, you're not even angry. You're just numb and winter. Oh, winter hasn't truly begun yet. By the time the snow turns thick enough to swallow your boots, you've stopped feeling your feet. That's a little concerning considering you're still using them. Every step is a gambolus, hidden under powder, a crack in the path, or worse, a frozen corpse disguised as a snowdrift. You try not to look down. Too many faces frozen mid-scream, like statues made by a very angry, very cold sculptor. Napoleon finally gives up the illusion of command. He leaves his army what's left of it and rushes back to Paris. You hear rumors he's taking a sleigh, a literal royal getaway ride. And you're dragging your own supplies like a medieval Uber driver. One soldier ties pots to his belt and clinks like a haunted kitchen. The rear guard takes the worst of it. Marshal Ney, somehow still fighting, becomes a legend. They say he holds off entire Russian forces alone, leading what's essentially a walking group of icicles. At one point, he's declared missing, maybe dead. But no, he shows up days later with what's left of his men, looking like they clawed their way out of hell. Spoiler, they basically did. And then, the river, the Berezina. You see it and think, finally water, passage, escape. But it's a trap disguised as hope. The Russians close in from three sides. Napoleon's engineers frantically build pontoon bridges while cannonballs skip across the ice. Soldiers fall in, ice breaks, boaties pile up. It's chaos but structured chaos. Napoleon escapes again. Thousands do not. By the time the survivors limp into friendly territory, barely 30,000 remain from the 600,000 who marched in. Do the math, it's enough to make a grown man sob into his beard. You think about the jokes you made back in Vilnius, about the bragging, the wine, the silk uniforms. Those uniforms are rags now. The medals are lost. The pride, frozen, burned, buried, somewhere between Smolensk and nowhere. And the weirdest detail, some men made it home with souvenirs. A strip of Moscow wallpaper, a candlestick from a church. One guy swears he stole a priest's hat for warmth. That hat probably saw more horror than any soldier. The Russian campaign wasn't just a defeat, it was a ghost story. The moment an unstoppable emperor met an immovable winter. The collapse wasn't sudden. It was a slow, grinding erasure. And you were there. You survived, barely now. The lights dim. The snow falls gently, no longer a weapon. Just flakes, silent and drifting. Somewhere in the dark, the empire that once seemed eternal is already beginning to crack. Breathe deeply. You've earned your rest now. Close your eyes. You're safe, you're warm, and for tonight, you're done marching. Napoleon's Russian campaign wasn't lost in battle, was devoured by fire, frost, and fatal pride. You lived through a masterpiece of tragedy where logistics failed, human will collapsed, and history was rewritten by the snow. You survived what most couldn't. Now, sleep, brave soul, as the last embers fade.